I still remember the exact moment when my father pushed me into that fountain at my sister's wedding. The designer dress clinging to my skin, the shocked gasps from the crowd, the photographer capturing every humiliating second. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my husband was about to walk through those doors with his security team. Standing there in the water, mascara running down my cheeks, I wasn't thinking about the embarrassment. I was thinking about the phone call I'd made 20 minutes earlier. "How close are you?" I'd texted. "10 minutes out," came the reply from Alexander Kane, my husband of 3 years. The same Alexander Kane whose defense company was worth $12 billion. The same man my family had no idea existed. You see, I'm Sarah Martinez, and for 31 years, I've been the family disappointment, the one who could never measure up to my perfect sister Isabella. While she danced at Juilliard, I was training at Quantico. While she charmed society parties, I was hunting terrorists. My family saw me as the failure who worked some mysterious government job. They had no idea I was Deputy Director of Counterterrorism at the FBI. But all of that was about to change. The fountain water was freezing against my skin as I struggled to stand up. My father, David Martinez, stood at the edge with that familiar look of disgust he'd perfected over the years. Behind him, the entire wedding reception had gone silent. Phones already out, recording my humiliation for posterity. "Maybe now you'll learn some respect," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard of the Ritz-Carlton Miami Beach. "Coming to your sister's wedding alone, sulking in the corner like some pathetic spinster." The laughter started then. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, family friends, society matrons who'd watched me grow up, all of them finding entertainment in my downfall. My mother, Elena, stood frozen beside my father, her former model beauty marred by embarrassment. Not for what had been done to me, but for what I was doing to the family image. "Dad, please," I managed, water dripping from my hair as I tried to climb out with some dignity. My emerald dress had turned dark green, clinging to me in ways that made the crowd's amusement even louder. "Don't dad me," he snapped. "You've done nothing but embarrass this family. No husband, no prospects, hiding behind that government desk job while your sister builds a real life." I caught sight of Isabella then, radiant in her Vera Wang gown, her new husband Timothy Blackwood III at her side. She wasn't laughing, but she wasn't stopping it either. She just watched with that cool detachment I'd known my entire life. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. "Perimeter secured. Entering now." I looked up at my father, water still streaming down my face, and smiled. For the first time in hours, I genuinely smiled. "You know what, Dad? You're absolutely right. I have been hiding something from this family." His eyes narrowed, confused by my sudden calm. "What are you talking about?" I pulled myself fully out of the fountain, ignoring the continued whispers and camera flashes. "You're about to find out exactly who your daughter really is." The confusion on his face was almost worth everything that had come before. Let me paint you the picture of the Martinez family dynamic. My father, David Martinez, built his real estate empire from nothing, climbing from a construction worker's son to owning half of Miami's luxury developments. But success never softened his edges. It only sharpened his need to project perfection. My mother, Elena, had been a successful model in her 20s before marrying into the Martinez fortune. She traded her career for social status, and every interaction became a performance for an invisible audience of judges. Appearances weren't just important to her, they were everything. Isabella, 2 years younger than me, had inherited the best of both parents. Dad's drive wrapped in Mom's beauty, with an added dose of natural charm that made everyone adore her instantly. She'd graduated from Juilliard, founded a nonprofit for underprivileged youth, and now married into the Blackwood banking dynasty. She was the daughter who never failed, never disappointed, never caused problems. Then there was me, Sarah, the eldest, who somehow always fell short, too serious, too independent, too focused on a career that nobody understood. While Isabella collected admirers and accolades, I collected degrees and security clearances. While she graced magazine covers for her charity work, I worked cases that would never see the light of day. The pattern had been set early. Isabella's dance recitals always coincided with my academic achievements. Her romantic relationships were celebrated while my single status was mourned. Even tonight, arriving alone at her wedding had been treated as another personal failure rather than a professional choice. What none of them knew was that I hadn't been alone by choice. I'd been protecting something precious, my marriage to a man whose wealth and influence would have changed everything about how they saw me. And I'd been protecting it for 3 years. Growing up Martinez meant growing up under a microscope. Our Coral Gables mansion, with its perfect gardens and infinity pool, wasn't just a home. It was a stage where the performance of success never ended. And from my earliest memories, I was always getting the choreography wrong. The comparisons started early. "Sarah, why can't you smile like your sister?" Mom would say during family photos, her hands adjusting my posture while Isabella naturally radiated joy. "Isabella has such natural grace," she'd continue, the implication hanging heavy that whatever grace I possessed was forced and insufficient. I threw myself into academics, thinking intelligence might earn me the approval that charm couldn't. Straight A's became my currency, debate team victories my portfolio. When I won the state science fair, Dad's response was measured. "Well done. Now let's see if you can keep it up." Meanwhile, Isabella's participation ribbon in a local art contest was celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant. The message was clear. My successes were expected, barely noteworthy. Isabella's were precious gifts to be treasured. High school brought new challenges. While Isabella dated the quarterback and was crowned homecoming princess, I was captain of the academic decathlon team and editor of the school newspaper. Valuable achievements that somehow felt invisible in our house. College acceptance letters arrived the same week. Isabella to Juilliard for dance, me to Georgetown for international relations with a full scholarship. "Dancing is Isabella's passion," Mom explained to relatives. "Sarah's just always been practical." Georgetown led to law school, which led to the FBI Academy. Each step took me further from Miami's social circles and deeper into a world my family couldn't understand. When I graduated from Quantico, they attended the ceremony, but spent the reception asking when I'd consider real career options. My rise through the bureau was meteoric. Counterterrorism work suited my analytical mind and perfectionist tendencies. By 28, I was leading major operations. By 30, I was being considered for deputy director positions. But none of these achievements made it into family dinner conversations. "Sarah's still with the government," became Mom's standard explanation at social gatherings, delivered with the same tone she might use to discuss a chronic illness. It was during a joint operation with the Pentagon that I met Alexander Kane. Not in some romantic movie-style encounter, but in a briefing room where his defense technology company was presenting security solutions for a classified program. His brilliant mind was immediately apparent, but it was his kindness that caught me off guard. "You asked the smartest questions in there," he told me over coffee after the meeting. "Most people are intimidated by the technical details. You went straight to the strategic implications. For the first time in my life, someone was impressed by my professional competence rather than tolerating it. Our courtship was intense, but carefully private. Both our positions demanded discretion. When we married 18 months later, in a simple ceremony with 2 witnesses, it felt like claiming something purely mine. For 3 years, we'd built a life together, separate from my family's toxic dynamics. Alexander understood why I kept our marriage private, respected my need for boundaries. His success never diminished mine. Instead, he celebrated it in ways my family never had. But tonight, those carefully maintained boundaries were about to shatter. The invitation to Isabella's wedding had arrived 6 months ago, embossed in gold and practically dripping with presumption. Isabella Martinez would marry Timothy Blackwood III in what promised to be Miami's social event of the year. The Blackwoods owned half the banks in Florida, and this union was being treated as a merger of dynasties. Alexander had been scheduled to be in Washington, finalizing a defense contract that couldn't be postponed. "I can reschedule," he offered, reading my hesitation. "Your family is important." "No," I insisted. "This contract affects national security." "I'll be fine for one afternoon." I'd handled international terrorists. Surely I could manage a family wedding. The morning of the wedding, I chose my outfit carefully. A sophisticated navy dress that suggested success without screaming wealth, paired with understated jewelry Alexander had given me. Professional, polished, untouchable. If only I felt that way inside. The Ritz-Carlton's ballroom had been transformed into a tropical paradise for Isabella's big day. White orchids and bird of paradise flowers cascaded from crystal chandeliers, and the afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. It was exactly the kind of over-the-top display my parents lived for. I handed my invitation to the usher, who checked his list with a slight frown. "Miss Martinez, we have you at table 15. "Not the family table, naturally." I nodded politely, understanding immediately what that meant. My cousin Carmen spotted me first, her eyes widening before her face arranged itself into a practiced smile. "Sarah, what a surprise. We weren't sure you'd make it." Her gaze slid pointedly to my empty side. "And you came alone. Again." "I did," I replied simply, not offering explanations she wouldn't believe anyway. "How brave," she said with manufactured sympathy. "After that whole thing with the lawyer you were dating last year, what was his name? Mom said it was devastating when he chose that paralegal over you. A complete fabrication. I'd never dated a lawyer, but this was the Martinez family specialty, creating narratives that positioned me as the perpetual failure. Your memory must be confusing me with someone else," I said calmly. More relatives approached, each interaction following the same pattern. My Aunt Rosa commented on my sensible haircut and how it was smart for a woman in my position to give up on complicated styles. Uncle Miguel asked loudly if I was still shuffling papers for the government and whether I'd considered something more social, since those jobs never impress the right kind of man. My cousin Daniela, Isabella's maid of honor, floated over with air kisses that deliberately missed my cheeks. Sarah. God, it's been forever. Love the dress. Is it from that outlet mall? You always were so good at finding deals. She didn't wait for an answer before continuing. Isabella was just saying she wasn't sure you'd come. You know, since you missed the bridal shower and the bachelorette weekend and the rehearsal dinner. Each event had conflicted with operations I couldn't discuss, classified briefings that took precedence over social obligations. I'd sent generous gifts with heartfelt notes. Work commitments, I said simply. Right, your mysterious government job. She made air quotes around the words. Timothy's cousin works for the State Department. He says those administrative positions can be so demanding. I just smiled, letting them believe I pushed papers in some forgotten federal building. The truth, that I was personally responsible for preventing terrorist attacks on American soil, wasn't mine to share. Yet, Mom appeared then, resplendent in a pale pink designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Sarah, you made it. Her tone suggested I'd completed an epic journey rather than a simple drive across Miami. I wouldn't miss Isabella's wedding, I said. Her eyes performed their familiar inventory of my appearance, searching for flaws to highlight. That color is so severe on you. You should have consulted me before buying something so stark. Before I could respond, trumpets announced the bridal party's arrival. Isabella made her entrance as the new Mrs. Blackwood, radiant on Timothy's arm. Her Vera Wang gown was a masterpiece, her smile luminous, her happiness undeniable. Dad beamed with pride, looking at her like she was the sun itself. The ceremony had been flawless. The reception, a carefully orchestrated celebration of wealth and status. I found myself relegated to the periphery, watching from table 15 as my family held court at the center of it all. During the family photos, I'd been told they were running behind schedule and would catch me later. Later never came. Isabella's maid of honor speech was particularly pointed. Growing up with Isabella was like having the sister I never had, Daniela said, somehow managing to look directly at me while delivering the line. I maintained my composure through it all, checking my watch periodically. Alexander would be here soon, just a little longer. The evening was reaching its crescendo when Dad decided to make his move. The reception was in full swing when my father tapped his crystal champagne flute for attention. The crowd quieted as he took center stage beside the elaborate ice sculpture of intertwined swans, his trial lawyer presence commanding the room. Tonight, he began, his voice carrying the practiced projection of someone accustomed to addressing juries, is the proudest day of my life. My beautiful Isabella has made a match that exceeds even a father's highest hopes. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the crowd. Timothy stepped forward, his banker's smile perfectly calibrated for the audience. Timothy, Dad continued, turning to address his new son-in-law. You're not just gaining a wife tonight. You're gaining entrance into a family built on excellence, achievement, and unwavering standards. He raised his glass higher, his voice growing stronger. To Isabella, who has never once disappointed us. From her first steps to her graduation from Juilliard with highest honors, from her humanitarian work to her impeccable choice in a husband, she has been nothing but a source of pride and joy. My chest tightened. Not because I expected to be mentioned. I knew better after 31 years, but because of the deliberate omission. Isabella had never disappointed them. The unspoken comparison hung in the air like smoke. I quietly slipped toward the terrace doors, needing air and space before Alexander arrived. The Miami sunset painted the bay in brilliant oranges and pinks, and for a moment, I almost felt peaceful. "Leaving so soon, Sarah?" I turned to find Dad standing 10 feet away, microphone still in hand, his voice amplified for the entire reception to hear. The crowd had followed us out, drawn by the promise of drama. "Just getting some air," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Running away, more like it," he said, and the microphone carried his words to every corner of the terrace. Classic Sarah, disappearing when family obligations become inconvenient. Heat crawled up my neck. That's not true. Isn't it? His voice had taken on the cross-examination tone I remembered from childhood. "You've missed half the wedding events. You arrived alone without even bringing a guest. You've spent the entire evening lurking in corners instead of celebrating your sister's happiness." The crowd had fallen completely silent, sensing blood in the water. "I'm sorry if my attendance has somehow offended you," I said carefully. "She couldn't even find a date," Dad announced to the room, and scattered nervous laughter followed. 31 years old and not a prospect in sight. Meanwhile, your sister has secured one of Miami's most eligible bachelors. The laughter grew louder, encouraged by his performance. "Dad," I said quietly, "this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," he retorted, advancing toward me. "This is a celebration of success, of family achievement, something you would know nothing about." Each word was calculated to wound, designed to penetrate years of carefully constructed armor. I glanced at Mom and Isabella, looking for any sign they might intervene. They simply watched. Mom with a tight smile, Isabella with barely concealed satisfaction. "You think we don't know why you're really alone?" Dad continued, his voice rising. "Why you hide behind that mysterious government job? You've always been jealous of your sister's accomplishments. Always the disappointment. Always the—" "Dad, please stop," I whispered, aware of hundreds of eyes on us, phones recording our family's dirty laundry. "Stop what? Telling the truth? The truth that you've never measured up? That you're an embarrassment to the Martinez name?" Something inside me shifted, not toward anger, but toward clarity. A strange calm settled over me as I looked at this man who was supposed to protect me, who instead was publicly destroying me at my sister's wedding. "You have no idea who I am," I said quietly. "I know exactly who you are," he snarled. And then it happened. His hands connected with my shoulders, a forceful shove that caught me completely off guard. I stumbled backward, arms windmilling, reaching for something to grab. For a suspended moment, I felt weightless. Then the shocking cold as I plunged into the fountain. The water engulfed me instantly, my carefully styled hair collapsing, my navy dress billowing before clinging like a second skin. But as the physical shock hit me, something else clicked into place. The calm, analytical mindset that had served me through countless crisis situations. This wasn't a daughter being humiliated by her father. This was an operation, and I was about to take control. I pushed myself up slowly, water streaming from my ruined dress. Through dripping strands of hair, I saw Dad's triumphant expression, Mom's hand covering what might have been a smile, Isabella's undisguised satisfaction. The photographer was snapping picture after picture, capturing my humiliation for posterity. The crowd's reaction came in waves, shocked gasps, uncertain titters, then full-throated laughter and scattered applause. Someone wolf whistled. Another voice called out, "Pool party after the cake cutting." But I wasn't the broken woman they expected to see. As I stood fully upright in the fountain, water cascading from my designer dress, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete freedom from their approval. "Remember this moment," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly hushed terrace. Not shouting, not emotional, just clear and precise, using the tone that made hardened FBI agents snap to attention. Dad's smile faltered. Something in my voice must have registered, because uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Remember exactly how you treated me?" I continued, stepping carefully toward the fountain's edge. "Remember the choices you made tonight. Remember what you did to your daughter in front of all these people, because I promise you, I will never forget." The laughter died completely. Even Dad seemed momentarily speechless, thrown by my unexpected composure. I climbed out of the fountain with as much dignity as my soaked condition allowed, creating a trail of water across the expensive stone flooring. "Sarah, what?" Mom started, but I held up a hand. "No," I said simply. "You don't get to speak now. You've had 31 years to speak up for me, and you chose silence. So now you get to listen." I pulled out my phone, which I'd thankfully left with my clutch at the table, and sent a quick text. "Perimeter status?" The response was immediate. "Team in position, awaiting your signal." For 3 years, Alexander and I had kept our marriage private. For 3 years, I'd protected our relationship from my family's toxicity. But tonight had burned those bridges. There was no relationship left to protect. I sent another text. "Execute approach. Full detail." My phone buzzed with Alexander's response. "ETA 3 minutes. Security sweep commencing." I walked to the center of the terrace, still dripping, still somehow commanding attention despite my disheveled state. The crowd watched me with fascination, unsure what was happening, but sensing something significant was building. "You know what's interesting about my job?" I said to Dad, my voice carrying easily in the hushed space. "I deal with people who underestimate others for a living, terrorists who think Americans are weak, foreign agents who assume our security is inferior, crime families who believe their secrets are safe." Dad's frown deepened. "Sarah, what are you—" "The thing is," I continued, "underestimating your opponent is usually the last mistake you get to make. Because while you're busy being arrogant, they're busy being prepared." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Isabella stepped forward, her wedding gown rustling. "Sarah, you're being dramatic. This is my wedding, not the time for your mysterious government worker fantasies." I smiled at her, and something in that expression made her step back. "Government worker, is that what you think I do? File papers, answer phones, process applications?" "Don't you?" Mom asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice for the first time I could remember. Before I could answer, a commotion at the terrace entrance drew everyone's attention. The sound of multiple vehicles arriving in rapid succession. Car doors closing with military precision. The appearance of men in perfectly tailored suits conducting subtle security sweeps. My heart rate picked up despite my outward calm. After 3 years of marriage, Alexander still had that effect on me, and in approximately 60 seconds, my family was about to meet the man they never knew existed. "What's happening?" someone in the crowd whispered. I checked my watch with theatrical precision. "You're about to find out exactly who your daughter really is," I said to Dad, echoing his own words back to him. The terrace doors opened with authority. 2 security personnel entered first. Marcus and Elena, I recognized, their alert eyes scanning the crowd with professional efficiency. They wore impeccable suits that couldn't quite disguise their military bearing or the discreet earpieces that kept them connected to their team. Whispers rippled through the reception like wildfire. "Who are these people? Is this some kind of law enforcement? Did someone call the police?" Dad approached the security team with his chest puffed out, every inch the outraged host. "Excuse me, this is a private event. If you're looking for someone specific, you'll need to—" Marcus looked through him as if he were transparent, touching his earpiece and speaking quietly into his wrist mic. "Perimeter secure, subject located, proceeding with extraction protocol." "Extraction?" Dad sputtered. "What the hell is going on here?" That's when Alexander walked in. My husband filled the doorway like he owned it, which, given his usual confidence, wasn't surprising. But tonight, there was something different about Alexander Kane. An edge that spoke of barely controlled fury, and the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. He stood 6'3" with the broad shoulders of someone who'd played varsity swimming at MIT before building a defense empire worth $12 billion. His custom Tom Ford suit was immaculate, despite having just stepped off a helicopter. His dark hair slightly windblown, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Those brilliant blue eyes that could be gentle as summer rain when he looked at me were now Arctic ice as they surveyed the scene before him. They took in my soaked condition, the crowd's expectant faces, my father's aggressive posture, and my family's confused expressions in a matter of seconds. When his gaze finally found mine, his expression softened into the private smile reserved only for me. He moved through the crowd with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to be anywhere, and people instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path directly to where I stood. Behind him, 4 more security personnel entered and positioned themselves strategically around the terrace's perimeter. The wedding guests had gone completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Sarah," Alexander said when he reached me, his voice a warm bass that somehow carried to every corner of the hushed terrace. He took my hands in his thumbs brushing over my knuckles in our private gesture of connection. "I'm sorry I'm late." "You're right on time," I replied, feeling truly steady for the first time all evening. He leaned down and kissed me, not a showy display, but a genuine greeting between partners who'd been apart too long. His hand moved protectively to the small of my back as he turned to face my stunned family. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez," he said with perfect politeness that somehow conveyed exactly zero warmth. "I'm Alexander Kane, Sarah's husband." The words hit my family like a physical blow. Mom's face went through a spectacular series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, calculation, and finally a strained attempt at gracious surprise. Dad's mouth opened and closed without sound, his face cycling through shades of red I'd never seen before. "Husband?" Mom repeated, her voice unnaturally high. "But Sarah never mentioned—" 3 years next month," Alexander supplied smoothly. "We keep our private life private for obvious security reasons." His tone suggested that those reasons should be obvious to any thinking person. Isabella stepped forward, her white gown making her look like an avenging angel. "This is ridiculous. Sarah doesn't have a husband. She's making this up for attention. On my wedding day." Alexander's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Only someone who knew him as well as I did would notice the dangerous glint in his eyes as he looked at my sister. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said with Arctic courtesy, "congratulations on your marriage. I apologize for missing the ceremony. International defense contracts kept me in Washington until a few hours ago." The formal politeness of his response somehow made Isabella's accusation look even more petulant by contrast. She flushed, looking uncertainly between Alexander, his security team, and the increasingly fascinated wedding guests. Dad found his voice again, puffing up like an angry rooster. "Now listen here, young man. I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but showing up at my daughter's wedding with hired actors and some elaborate story." "Actors?" Alexander interrupted, his voice deceptively mild. "Is that what you think this is?" One of Timothy's groomsmen had apparently been Googling on his phone because he suddenly looked up with shock written across his face. "Holy shit," he said, loud enough for half the terrace to hear. "That's really Alexander Kane, defense contractor. Forbes cover last month. Net worth estimated at $12 billion. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd like a wave. Mom swayed slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady herself. Several phones immediately came out as guests began frantically searching for more information. $12 billion? Someone whispered. "Kane Defense Solutions. They contract with the Pentagon," another voice added. "That's the guy who revolutionized military communications," Timothy said, his banker's mind clearly working through the implications. "His systems protect half the classified installations in the country." Dad's face had gone from red to ashen. That's not possible. We would have known. Sarah would have told us." "Would she?" Alexander asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "When have you ever shown interest in Sarah's actual life? From what I've observed today and what she shared over the years, your interest extends only to criticizing her choices, not understanding them." The truth of that statement hung in the air like smoke. Even some of the wedding guests were beginning to look uncomfortable, sensing they'd witnessed something ugly. "This is insane," Isabella said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Sarah is just what?" I asked quietly. "Just your disappointing older sister? Just the family failure? Just the woman you pushed into a fountain 20 minutes ago for your entertainment?" Alexander's arm tightened around my waist, not possessively, but protectively. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying easily through the silent crowd, "the woman you've been treating so poorly is Sarah Martinez, Deputy Director of Counterterrorism Operations for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. If the first revelation had been a bomb, this one was a nuclear strike." The collective intake of breath was audible. Several people actually staggered. "FBI?" Dad whispered. "Deputy Director?" Mom added faintly. "Counterterrorism," Alexander confirmed, his tone suggesting he took great pleasure in their shock. "Your daughter has the highest security clearance possible. She makes decisions daily that affect national security. She saved more American lives than you'll ever know." He turned to look directly at my father, and his voice dropped to something that could freeze fire. She's brilliant, courageous, and formidable. She has the respect of hardened field agents and government officials alike. And for some inexplicable reason, she still cared enough about your approval to attend this wedding, despite knowing exactly how you would treat her. Dad seemed to have aged 20 years in the last 5 minutes. The confident bullying attorney had vanished, replaced by a confused old man whose entire worldview was crumbling. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Would you have believed me?" I replied simply. "Or would you have found a way to diminish this too?" His silence was answer enough. The moment stretched between us like a taut wire, 3 decades of family dysfunction crystallizing into perfect clarity. My father, the man who'd built an empire on his ability to read people and situations, looked completely lost. My mother, who'd navigated Miami society with the precision of a master strategist, seemed frozen in place. Isabella was the first to break. "This isn't possible," she said, but her voice had lost all its earlier certainty. "Sarah works in... she does..." "What exactly did you think I did, Isabella?" I asked gently. "In all these years, did you ever actually ask?" She had no answer. None of them did. Alexander's phone buzzed discreetly, and he glanced at it before speaking quietly into his wrist mic. "Understood. Maintain perimeter." He turned back to my family with that same Arctic politeness. "I'm afraid we'll need to cut this short. Sarah has a situation requiring her immediate attention." As if summoned by his words, Marcus appeared at my shoulder with a secure tablet. "Director Martinez," he said formally, using my full title for the crowd's benefit. "We have movement on the Caracas operation. The surveillance package picked up anomalous communications. Time-sensitive." I took the tablet, scanned the encrypted briefing, and made a quick decision. "Authorize secondary protocol, but increase surveillance on the tertiary targets. I'll call in for the full briefing in 30 minutes. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, accepting the tablet back. The professional exchange happened in seconds, but its impact on the watching crowd was seismic. This wasn't performance art. This wasn't an elaborate hoax. This was real power, real responsibility, and I wielded it with casual competence. Timothy stepped forward, his banker's training overriding his shock. "Director Martinez, Mr. Kane," he said formally. "It's been an honor to meet you both. I hope we'll have the opportunity to get to know each other better in the future." His genuine respect and obvious intelligence in recognizing the gravity of what he'd witnessed was refreshing. I shook his hand warmly. "I'd like that, Timothy. Congratulations on your marriage." My parents remained frozen, decades of their carefully constructed narrative lying in ruins around them. The guests were still whispering, phones out, frantically trying to verify what they'd just witnessed. "Sarah," Dad finally managed, "we need to talk about all of this. We didn't know..." "No," I said gently but firmly. "You didn't know because you never asked. You created a story about who I was and refused to see anything that contradicted it." "But we're family," Mom protested weakly. "We've always wanted what's best for you." The naked attempt to rewrite history might have worked in the past. Not anymore. "No, Mom, you haven't. You've wanted me to be someone I'm not so you could feel better about yourselves. There's a difference." Alexander checked his watch. "The helicopter is waiting, and we have the Pentagon briefing at 9. I nodded, then turned to face my family one last time. The crowd had begun to disperse, conversations buzzing with excitement about what they'd witnessed. This story would be told and retold throughout Miami's social circles for years to come. "Congratulations again, Isabella," I said to my sister, who still seemed incapable of speech. "I genuinely hope you and Timothy will be happy together." Isabella's mouth moved soundlessly before she finally found her voice. "Sarah, we didn't—" "I'm sorry." It was perhaps the first genuine thing she'd said to me in years. "I know," I replied, "but sorry doesn't erase 31 years of treatment. It's a start, but it's not enough." Dad stepped forward desperately. "What do we need to do? How do we fix this?" I studied his face, looking for any sign that he understood the depth of what had happened here. "You figure out whether you want a relationship with your actual daughter or just with the successful version that finally meets your approval." With that, Alexander and I turned and walked toward the terrace exit, my security team falling into formation around us. Behind us, the whispers had erupted into full-voiced exclamations as the reality of what they'd witnessed sank in. "The Martinez family will never be the same," I heard someone say. They were right, but neither would I. As we approached the hotel's rooftop helipad, I felt a curious lightness, the weight of seeking their approval, of diminishing myself to make them comfortable, of accepting scraps when I deserved a feast. All of it seemed to lift away into the Miami night. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked as we climbed into the sleek helicopter. "Free," I said, and meant it. For the first time in my life, completely free. The helicopter lifted off, carrying us away from the wreckage of my old life and toward whatever came next. Below us, the lights of Miami spread out like a glittering carpet, and somewhere in that tapestry was a family finally confronting the truth they'd never wanted to face. 6 months after Isabella's wedding, I stood in the kitchen of our Biscayne Bay penthouse, preparing dinner for an unusual gathering. Alexander was setting the table on our terrace, the Miami skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tonight, we were hosting my parents for the first time since that explosive evening. The journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. In the weeks following the wedding, my phone had exploded with messages from family members who'd suddenly remembered my existence. Distant cousins wanted lunch dates. Aunts inquired about holiday plans. My father sent formal emails requesting meetings to discuss our relationship moving forward. I'd ignored most of them. The few I'd answered received the same response. "I need time to process what happened. I'll reach out when I'm ready." It took 3 months before I was. The first conversation with my parents happened in a therapist's office. Dr. Rachel Vega, a family counselor who specialized in toxic dynamics, had helped facilitate what might have been the most honest conversation the Martinez family had ever had. "I need you to understand something," I'd said to my parents during that first session. "Your approval isn't available for purchase anymore. Not with my career success, not with my husband's wealth, not with anything. Either you want a relationship with me as I am, or we don't have a relationship at all." My mother had cried. Actually cried, which I'd never seen before. "We didn't realize how badly we treated you," she'd whispered. "We thought we were motivating you to be better." "By making me feel worthless?" I'd asked. "By celebrating Isabella while ignoring me? By pushing me into a fountain at her wedding?" My father had been quieter, more withdrawn. The confident attorney who dominated every room was gone, replaced by a man genuinely grappling with the consequences of his choices. "I was wrong," he'd finally said. "Not just that night, but for years. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." The path forward had required establishing clear boundaries. Family dinners would happen only if they could discuss my life without comparison to Isabella's. My career was off limits for their social bragging. Alexander and I would leave immediately if anyone treated me with disrespect. Most importantly, they had to acknowledge the damage they'd done without trying to justify it. Tonight's dinner was a test of sorts. Isabella and Timothy were joining us, along with my cousin Emma, who'd become a genuine friend in the months since the wedding. It would be the first time we'd all been together since that explosive night. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. Alexander answered it, greeting my parents with polite warmth that had grown more genuine over the months. They'd been attending therapy individually and as a couple, working to understand how their pursuit of perfection had damaged their relationships with both their daughters. "Sarah," my mother said, embracing me carefully. The hug felt different now, less performative, more real. "Thank you for having us." Isabella and Timothy arrived 15 minutes later. My sister looked beautiful as always, but there was something different about her too. Softer, perhaps. Less certain of her position as the family favorite. "Hello, Sarah," she said quietly. We were still working on our relationship, taking it slowly. Years of damage couldn't be repaired overnight, but we were both trying. Dinner conversation was carefully neutral at first. Timothy's work, Alexander's latest defense contracts, my mother's new volunteer work with a literacy program. But gradually, it became more natural. My father asked Alexander genuine questions about his company, showing real interest rather than performing for an audience. "I've been thinking," Isabella said as we shared dessert on the terrace, "about that night, about everything that led up to it." She looked directly at me. "I was jealous of you." The admission surprised everyone, including me. Jealous? Of what? Of how independent you were. How you never seemed to need anyone's approval. I spent my whole life performing for applause, and you just did what you believed in. She paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. I think I resented that strength because I didn't have it. It was perhaps the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. "You know what I've learned through all this?" I said, looking around the table at these people who'd hurt me so deeply and were now genuinely trying to do better. Family isn't just about shared DNA. It's about who shows up for you, who sees you clearly and supports you anyway, who celebrates your successes without jealousy. I reached for Alexander's hand. Sometimes those people share your bloodline. Sometimes they don't. The magic happens when you stop forcing connections that cause you pain and instead nurture the ones that bring mutual respect and love. My father cleared his throat. "Sarah, I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. Not because of your title or your husband's success, but because of who you are." It just took me too long to see it. As I looked around the table at my family, both chosen and biological, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending the damage hadn't happened. It was about setting boundaries that protected your peace while leaving room for genuine change. The little girl who'd spent 31 years seeking approval from people who withheld it was gone. In her place sat a woman who knew her worth, who had built a life filled with people who truly valued her, and who was finally free to love and be loved without conditions. What would you do if your family treated you this way for decades? How would you handle discovering your worth wasn't dependent on their approval? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice, healing, and personal triumph.